Hello everyone, this is Sam from Language Atlas, and in this video I will show you the Spanish A1 Anki Deck. I will divide the video in 3 parts. In the first part, I'll show you the overall course content. In the second part, I'll show you 3 individual decks. And in the third part, I'll show you some brief editing options. Please have a look in the description where you can find the timestamps. If you'd like to skip to a particular part of the video, this is where you can find the exact time descriptions. So without further ado, let's get started. The first thing that you want to do is go to wherever the Spanish Anki Deck is and double click on it. After you've double clicked, you can find this Spanish A0, A1 plus A1. And inside it you can see card types, Spanish A0, A1 and Spanish A1. So now I'd like to get started with my first point is to show you the course content. I like to ignore the card types for now, but I'll get back to it a bit later. I'd like to get started with this, Spanish A0, A1. After maximizing this, you can see there's Chapter 1, Pronouns, Chapter 2, Verbs, Chapter 3, Idioms, Chapter 4, Articles and Nouns, and finally Chapter 5, Questions and Interrogatives. In the first chapter, namely Chapter 1, Pronouns, you'll learn about the subject pronouns in Spanish. So I, you, he, she, we, and they. In Chapter 2, you'll learn the most basic, however also the most important verbs in Spanish. Estar, ser, and tener. To be, and to have. Now, these are essentially really the most important verbs that you'll use, I can almost guarantee 100% in almost every conversation you'll have. You have Chapter 3, Idioms. And here you learn the most basic and essential idioms in Spanish. So how to say there is, there are, how to say my name is, how to say where I'm from or where you would be from, how to say how old you are, where you live, and how someone is, how you can ask how someone is. In Chapter 4, you'll learn about articles and nouns, and you'll learn about the definite and indefinite articles in Spanish. So the, plural, the, and a and end. Then you can go to Chapter 5, and this is also the last deck of the Spanish A0, A1 Anki Deck. You learn about questions and interrogatives, and namely how to say what is it in Spanish. Now that's that for Spanish A0, A1. Now I'd like to get started with Spanish A1. And as you can see, there are also a few chapters in Spanish A1, namely 7. I'd like to get started with the first one, Chapter 1, Verbs. And you can see that the Chapter A1 Verbs is divided into a few subchapters. We have regular verbs, we have semi-regular stem-changing verbs, common irregular verbs, irregular verb groups, reflexive verbs, and verbs and time. Beginning with the first one, regular verbs. In Spanish, you have 3 verb groups: regular AR verbs, regular ER verbs, and regular IR verbs. If you open up this one, regular ER verbs, you can see it over here, but there are also 2 very important regular verbs that I've included as well. You'll probably use them a lot, hence I've given them a separate category. After you finish the regular verbs, you'll see the semi-regular stem-changing verbs. In Spanish, there are certain verbs which change their stem when you conjugate them. There are 3 groups: E to I, E to IE, and O to UE. Then you also have common irregular verbs. Now these are irregular verbs that you tend to use also on a day-to-day basis. Think of saber, to know, or ver, to see. Then we have irregular verb groups. Now there are certain verb groups which are just unlike any other verb groups, hence they're irregular. They tend to be irregular in the I form, so the yo form, and they're grouped over here. Then we have reflexive verbs, and again, reflexive verbs are verbs which apply to the speaker. So over here you'll have reflexive verbs explained, and then in this Anki Deck you'll learn how to say what your name is and how to ask someone else's name. Then we have verbs and time. Now there are 3 tenses that you'll learn about, the most important one being the present tense. You'll also learn a bit about the near future and the present progressive, as well as how to form the present progressive And there's a lesson which contrasts the present progressive with the present tense. Then we go to chapter 2, and in chapter 2 you learn about idioms. Now again, these are also idioms that I think you'll use on a day-to-day basis. For example, how to express obligation, how to express pain, or how to say that you like something. Also, two very important lessons on when to use estar versus when to use ser. In chapter 3, you'll explore articles and nouns. Again, nouns, a complete guide to the Spanish nouns, how to know the gender of nouns, and again, a smaller introduction. Then we have contractions, certain things contract in Spanish, what are they and how does it work? And then we have indefinite articles, how you can say some or a few. And then of course we have definite articles and the fact that you have to use definite articles with clothing and the body. Then we'll go to chapter 4, adjectives and adverbs. You learn a bit about Spanish regular adjectives. Then you learn also a few things about quantitative adjectives, how to say each or how to say every time unit, that is. So every day, every year, every month. Then we have demonstrative adjectives, how you can say that, those, and this, these. So that jacket or this notebook. Then we have adverbs. You'll learn how to form regular adverbs in Spanish. After that, we have possessive adjectives. So how you can say, it is my phone, it is my computer, it is my house, or how it's your house or your sunglasses, those things. And finally, we have some few other things, how you can use color in Spanish, how you can say very, a lot, of, much, or many in Spanish, and also how to say more, less, or fewer. In chapter 5, you'll learn how to form what questions in Spanish. So for example, if you heard something and you don't know what it is, you can say, hey, what is that? You learn how to use it with nouns and verbs and other things. In chapter 6, you have negations. So how do you negate things? In English, you say don't. I don't have that, or I don't want that. But how do you say don't in Spanish? So you learn how to negate. And in chapter 7, you'll learn about prepositions and conjunctions. So how you can say that you're with someone or something, how you can say that you're between two things. And you learn a little bit about para and por as well. Now, that is that for the overall course content. I'd like to show you 3 individual decks. So I'll get started with point number 2. I'll show you 3 individual decks which can give you, I think, a good perspective on what you'll find in the Anki deck. I'll begin with chapter 1 of verbs, and then I'd like to go to regular AR verbs, as it's a very important group. You can see over here, this is the first card type. You can see there's a blank area over here. You can see a verb, the full verb, and then you see an English translation. And it's your job to know what goes over here.
Yo trabajo en esta empresa.
And the answer is trabajo. And you can see over here a full conjugation chart. So you can see how AR verbs are supposed to be conjugated. And then you can see an example. You can see the conjugation method. So there's a good explanation. Okay, how do you conjugate things in Spanish? So you find the infinitive, you cut off the ending, and then you add the new ending. Then you can see some common regular AR verbs. So these are some common regular AR verbs. And if you'd like to hear it again, you can click on this.
Yo trabajo en esta empresa.
Or you can press the R button as well. So this is the first card type. I'd like to show you a different card type as well.
Él siempre. Las malas no. Vos. Tú hablas. No.
Now this is the second card type. Essentially, you can see over here there's a blank area, and it's your job to type in the correct answer. So imagine I typed in this.
Yo trabajo en esta empresa.
And as you can see, it's the correct answer. So you can see it's in green. That means that it's good. And you can see the correct answer over here in green as well. And again, the other things you have seen. So for the second card type, it's your job to type in the correct answer. Now I'd like to show you the third card type.
Él, la, vosotros, tú hablas, nosotros.
Now this is the third card type. You see a sentence in Spanish and you have to know the correct translation in English.
Yo trabajo en esta empresa.
I work at this company. And again, you can see the same things that you've already seen before. And then the fourth card type.
Él siempre, las manos, vosotros, tú hablas, nosotros.
And then you can see an English sentence and you have to know the Spanish translation.
Yo trabajo en esta empresa.
And as always, it's the explanations we've seen before, the regular verbs. You can hear it again. There's a link as well to the article if you want to see it on the website as well. So you can see there are a lot of examples and you have to conjugate them all in the different forms. And essentially, that's how it works. You can see questions.
Él siempre canta en la ducha.
And you have to know the answer in the 4 ways that you'll be asked this. I'd like to show you something else as well. We'll go to idioms. I think a big thing that everyone often finds tricky is, okay, when do you use estar and when do you use ser? So I'd like to show you this deck, when to use ser. I think very simple one.
Yo soy británico.
I am British. And then there's a lesson on introduction to when to use ser in Spanish. And you can see, okay, there's a big conflict and then there's a mnemonic device. I called it doctoro. Probably you'll find doctor in some places as well, but then they use the same O for origin or occupation, but I don't like that. So I think every letter should have its own word. And then again, for example, you use it for description, you use it for origin, or if you talk about someone's character, time, occupation, relationships, and ownership. And conclusion, you tend to talk about things that are permanent for ser. And there's an entire deck that can train you on when to use this. So a few more examples. She is a dentist, and a dentist is occupation.
Ella es dentista.
Friend.
Ella es mi amiga.
Where you're from.
Yo soy de Italia.
Now, in this case, I mean, it's easy to know that you use ser all the time. So when you look at, for example, if you were to train chapter 2 idioms, then you can see many examples. And then at some point, such an example would come towards you or to you. And then you'd have to know, hey, is it ser or is it estar? And then for the third deck that I'd like to show you, I'd like to go to adjectives. I'd like to go to regular adjectives. And I'd like to go to this one. My sisters are friendly. And then again, you have to know what the right answer is over here.
Mis hermanas son amistosas.
And I think the big challenge over here is that you have to use the A rather than the O, because you're talking about sisters and they're women. Thus you use the A over here. And of course you have to know how to say friendly in Spanish as well. Another example, I think this is a bit similar. So yeah, for example, this one, my cousin works a lot.
Mi primo trabaja mucho.
And if it were a woman, it would be with an A, but because it's a man, you use an O. And of course, you have to know how to say a lot in Spanish, but you also know how to end it. And as you can see, for every example, there's also a picture. And this is good so you can remember it a lot better. So of course, there are many more decks that I can show you, but I think this gives you a good overview of what things are like. For the third point, I like to show you some brief editing options. And to do this, I'd like to use the card types deck, the one that we didn't talk about in the beginning, but we'll now talk about now. So I go to browse and I'll go to card types, and you can see over here there are 2 decks. There's a normal language atlas cards and the beginner friendly language atlas cards. Now what we've done up until now is that for every sentence there were 4 question types. You had to conjugate or fill in the correct answer. You have to type in a blank field. You see something in Spanish and you have to translate it to English, and then you see something in English and then you translate it into Spanish. And for some people this is a lot, and some people only want to do what's really essential. And for them, there's the beginner friendly language atlas cards, where essentially there's the conjugate. So there's the first question type.
Yo estoy contento.
As you can see over here, you have to fill in the correct part. And then we have the second one, you have to type in the blank field. So if you like to have only 2 ways to be tested, so 2 question types per sentence, you can switch over to the beginner friendly one. When you download the deck, it's by default in the beginner friendly one. I actually prefer it this way. I think it's a lot easier, and translation sometimes can be a bit too much. However, I've added it so that people that like to translate can do that as well. So I'd now like to show you how you can switch from one type to another. So what we do first is that we'll take the card types deck and we'll just take it out of the overall deck. We go to browse, and then I go to Spanish, and then I go to Control A or Command A, right mouse click, change note type, and then if I want to go to beginner friendly, I can click on choose, okay, yes, yes. And as you can see, for every sentence, there are now only 2 possible ways that you'll be asked something. So you either need to fill in the correct answer or type in the correct answer. But what if you regretted it and you want to go back? You do the same process, change note type, you go from beginner friendly to the language atlas card, you choose, okay, and that's it. So again, the big difference is that in the beginner friendly, you don't need to translate at all. And in the normal one, you do need to translate. By default, it's in the beginner friendly one, but you can go to the normal one as well. Finally, the last point is that if you want to change the amount of cards that you see, you go to options. You can see over here, new cards per day. You can decrease it if you want to. Let's say we want to go to 40, or we can even go to 30 if you want, and reviews. So if you've done a card, you have to see it again. You can decrease this again, and then things will be decreased. The best advice that I can give you is to start at a low number. This is because you really need to build a habit. But afterwards, if you really created a habit, you can increase more. You can get the deck at languageatlas.com. I'll put a link in the description. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can write me email, you can write something in the comments. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. This is it from me. I wish you the best of luck and see you next time. Goodbye.